Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So in this one we do have I hesitate to full on call it news, but at least it's an interesting video that is a Bryan interview on the official Avatar YouTube channel. So we'll get to that, but there is also a couple of further new rumors about Avatar Studios, which we will get to. But of course we have to start with this. It just came out a couple of hours ago, out of absolutely nowhere. It's just this 10-minute sort of, they call it an interview, but it's more of a 10-minute sort of like Bryan just discussing his journey with Avatar, from his like history as an animator leading into Avatar, Korra, the break he and Mike both kind of took from working on kind of TV and animation, and then sort of how Avatar Studios came about. And even though the title says that it teases the future of Avatar Studios, it is more along the lines of just like he notes the very, very basic information that like, yeah, we're working on a movie. He goes a little bit kind of in depth on sort of like the innovations in animation since they even did Korra, and where he thinks you'll see the sort of evolution in the kind of the quality of animation and the art, which I think is probably the main thing that to talk about in terms of like the details that he said. So in that sense, there's no news, there's no like big reveal from this. If you are caught up on Avatar Studios news, there's nothing new for you here. I think this works as a nice sort of kind of like intro to Avatar Studios news, in terms of like if you don't listen to all the podcasts, if you haven't kept track of all the scattered pieces of information that have come out. This gives you a lot of it, but it doesn't give you everything. In that this is where I'm very surprised that nowhere in this is it even flashed up on screen the whole idea of, at Comic-Con last year, they confirmed the first movie is Team Avatar and Co. I'm shocked that that's nowhere in this. Similarly, the fact that we do have a date officially for the first movie. It's not rumored, it's full-on official by Paramount. October 2025 for that first movie. None of that gets brought up here. So it is a little weird. It kind of makes it come across as if like, was this recorded like a couple of months ago? Because it doesn't seem up to date on like official stuff that's come out. But it also doesn't really seem to be about revealing anything. So the takeaway here, obviously less on news. I would personally would say it's more just that, whoa, the official Avatar YouTube channel has put up like an exclusive interview. That's sort of unheard of, because most of what they put up is just sort of clip compilations, and while some of it is interesting, you would say it is definitely not what you would expect from a 2 million subscriber channel for a franchise that's about to transition into a major expansion. The fact that they have like nothing about like news or a lot of the more recent content, the way they run the channel, the way they run the social medias in general has been very, very weird. I hope that this is the start of a bit of a transition into the channel being more of a direct source of news, and that this will be something that continues, because this is cool, but it shouldn't be a one-off. This should not be something that happens like really, really rarely. Like there should be, I think, a pretty quick follow-up with hopefully one with Mike, where he gives his thoughts on this. Mike tends to be, at least in my experience, he tends to be the one who's a little bit more willing to actually sort of, you know, give you a little tidbit or two, whereas Bryan doesn't tend to. So hopefully that this is just the start of that. And we see more of these little interviews, more of the sense that they can use the channel, which has 2 million subscribers. So it's a good platform to reveal news on if they get to properly revealing stuff here. They should use this to reveal pieces of news. They shouldn't have to rely on it going out to one of the bigger websites, or because everything is slow and behind, everything being kind of leaked, insider rumored at the moment. So yeah, it's a frustrating one, because like I feel like, I'm being a little negative here because I'm not super excited about the new interview, but the context for myself has to be brought in here as someone who has basically listened or read pretty much every interview Mike and Bryan have ever given about Avatar, the first like half of this is nothing new. It's just, I know Mike and Bryan's history. They go over it all the time. Braving the Elements went over it relatively recently. The big podcast, I think, that they did last year also went over it. It's in the art books and stuff like that. We know this stuff already. We know roughly how, production was on both shows. For some people, I think it will be interesting to kind of hear maybe him say that, like, he was sort of basically burned out after Korra. Like, he's just completely running on empty after that. And he even talks about how his friends were working on their shows, and all he could do as he was watching them was just think of, like, the network told you to do that, the network told you to do that. And you get the sense that, like, okay, a huge part of why they stopped doing animation immediately following Korra was just that they were done with dealing with that crazy like oversight from the kind of network. And so pretty long break post Korra, of course, we come back, and obviously the fact that they get this full studio and it seems like a ton of creative freedom to kind of do what they want because there's new people in charge. In terms of at Nickelodeon, kind of Paramount, they trust them to be able to make good stuff, and so I doubt there are too many restrictions in place, and that's more of the thing of like we basically know that that's the case. Again, they have talked about this in other podcast stuff, so even that isn't new. It's more, I suppose, packaging it all together in this 1 10-minute video is nice to get, just to show you sort of like Bryan's journey as a creator of like, this is why there was a bit of a kind of like dead period for like Avatar in terms of like, you didn't hear much from Mike and Bryan. And now they're kind of ready to go for this new stuff, which is exciting, but they won't talk about the new stuff. And that's what happens here. Like, as you go through this, he talks about stepping away, the comeback, technology versus art. It's sort of like this section here, I think, where he talks about like, innovations in animation that have happened within like basically the last 10 years, and where he kind of sees where the big advancements for the new Avatar Studios projects are going to be. He thinks it's sort of like less in terms of just like general quality, but just compositing is going to be the big thing that makes the show look better. He again, I think, reiterates, as we know from him, he really respects the history of animation, talks a lot about hand-drawn stuff, but also utilizing technology. So they want to keep things traditional to a certain extent, but they don't want to sort of like limit themselves by forcing them to do things a certain way. But at the very least, like I like he's kind of talked about before, they're not kind of doing it in like mostly CG to make it easier and stuff like that. He really emphasizes 2D as the big thing, and almost in this talks about how the almost like 3D effect that they're going for is more going to be from a real emphasis put on the like compositing to give the animation that depth that they're kind of looking for here, to kind of match some of the higher quality animated stuff that has come out over the last few years that have shown that high level of compositing. That's where the depth sort of comes out, and you see that this is why Bryan is the art guy of the duo. Is that like when he talks about this stuff, you can see he's passionate and super interested in it. So that is nice to know. But yeah, it's definitely this point here when we get to like the last couple of minutes, and it's like, what's next for Avatar Studios, and wrapping up the video, that it's just like, this is where the title, I think, sort of fails a little bit, and there's a real sense for like, this isn't even up to date with the news that we have, let alone being anything resembling like a new thing. Like, it's just, it is so incredibly vague when he actually comes to talk about the new stuff, that you would almost believe that this is a video that should have released back in like 2021, that this should have almost been effectively almost the reveal of Avatar Studios is with this video, that like, you have the whole story of like, oh, Bryan talking about how burned out he is, and then he's like, but we're back and we're doing a movie, because that's the main reveals. That's the main like Avatar Studios news that's sort of talked about here. The problem is that we've known about that since 2021. So 2 years on from like us learning a lot of this basic stuff, this just feels like, come on, you have to throw us something here in terms of actual proper information here. But like, hopefully this just needs to be used as a little bit of a platform to kind of finally get the channel going. Hopefully they do other ones of these, like I said, with, for instance, Mike, Laura Montgomery, given that she's the director on the first movie. It would be interesting to see her, who's also a veteran on both shows, kind of used in something like this. That would be really, really cool. But I don't know. It's a weird one. But the timing on this is kind of weird, let's just say. So let's get into some of the other rumors. So in relation to this thing, which I think I talked about in my last news update video, the whole, the movie, like information, whatever, Daddy Yang is coming soon. Like, what? Suddenly, one of the more trusted leakers, Night Edge Media, like retweeted this and actually said, the GIF here says, it's true. So, what's true? Because to me, like the news here is probably the coming soon bit, because you don't know what way to interpret what they mean by the first part. So on the more trusted end of things, like, what does that mean? What's coming soon? Because the movie isn't coming soon. It's 2025. That's officially confirmed. So what are we talking about here? And that's just a kind of like growing thing of like, given that, like, for instance, just this week, the amount of little rumored leaked pieces of information that we got was kind of crazy in the grand scheme of things. So has something behind the scenes happened that has given more access to what's going on? Is there a bigger reveal coming, given that they're starting perhaps a little bit of a, let's bring Avatar Studios more into the spotlight, talk about it a little bit more in the build up to something? We have to wait and see. On the composer for the Netflix live action show, Takeshi Furukawa, he did post about this himself. I forget if I mentioned this yesterday, about the whole stewardship of, like, he's getting the themes, so there'll be a sense for, he is not just like composing new stuff himself, but he will also get access to the original show's kind of music, and I guess we're going to see some interesting blend of that. This probably also helps to explain perhaps a dual use for sort of putting the time into, like, remaster, redo the original Avatar soundtrack. One, so they can release it, hopefully, and then two, so that it's a good enough quality to be utilized in a new 2023 project also. So that's just something that's kind of nice to know. Again, Night Edge Media also posted this. Kenneth Lin, best known for House of Cards, writing some House of Cards episodes, apparently is the one who wrote the first Avatar animated movie. So we apparently have our writer for the upcoming movie in 2025. Again, also the one apparently known as Hidden Kingdom, Echoes and Aftershocks, the Team Avatar movie. So we're wondering about this, like, what goes on. The source ultimately on this seemed to have initially been IMDb, but Avatar News got the full kind of like details on it, that the source is this known kind of like insider kind of leaker, whatever. They got the information from their Patreon. They're showing it with permission, and then from there, one of the people who had access to the Patreon, they added it to IMDb. So the initial source of this information is insider information. So it's not just one of these things where someone made something up and put it on IMDb, and it doesn't seem like it's more on the kind of maybe official end of like the actual people, adding official credits to IMDb either. So make of that what you will. I'm not super familiar with Kenneth Lin. Looking at it, it seems like probably better known as like the playwright aspect, and then has done some work on screenwriting stuff. House of Cards is a show known for its good writing, I believe. I haven't seen it myself, but again, this is the thing. I don't know who the big amazing writers are in this sort of a situation, and like what exactly we're meant to read into this. There seems to be something behind this, but obviously, there's not much to speculate on from this point of view. Other than just, again, it seems like we're beginning to get a sense for like this stuff is coming together. We're beginning to get leaks about like the title potentially, more of the kind of cast and crew beginning to come together on this, teases of like stuff about it potentially coming soon. And now, of course, they posted this. And even though there's nothing new in the official thing, the mere fact that they posted something like this, because this is where you get that idea with Mike and Bryan. When you hear them on, like, say, the Brave and the Elements podcast, you get the sense that they're almost annoyed when Janet Varney and Dante Bosco have to ask them at the start, do you have anything new to say about Avatar Studios? And they're like, no, just be patient, and like, let's move on to why we're actually here on this podcast. So I think it is somewhat notable when we at least get something official with Mike and Bryan talking about it, because of course they're not occasionally posting on their social medias themselves about like what's going on. Like they haven't posted about anything in months as far as I'm aware, at least Avatar related. So this, despite not being important in the grand scheme of things, feels important just because it's like they're going quite a few months without anything official Avatar Studios coming out. And so then to drop something like this with like teases and so on is kind of interesting. But the actual content, I would say, is disappointing for where we're at. It feels like this is something from a year ago or 2 years ago. Because that's the thing. In, just under a week, we are at exactly 2 years after finding out about Avatar Studios for the first time. And I think it's difficult to say that those 2 years have been amazing or anything like that. And so we need to eventually build to something happening for Avatar. So hopefully that comes soon. And hopefully there's a little bit of kind of momentum building here with the official stuff, the unofficial stuff, and hopefully we get something eventually, because it doesn't seem like there's an investors event this year, in that like we would have known about it if it's going to potentially be in the next kind of couple of days. They had the investors call, I believe, already, but that's a very kind of like different thing. So it feels like there's a missed opportunity. There's no chance for that kind of February reveal potentially. So what are we doing? That's the big thing here. And so, yeah, I think that kind of brings it to an end, where it's just like, what could have been? Because when I saw this, I was like, oh, official interview on the official channel with the title, like, teases the future of Avatar Studios. I felt like, oh, are they going to show something here? I wasn't expecting anything huge, but like, I was still let down, and that sort of thing. And that shouldn't be the case. Even if I'm super up to date on everything that's officially out, the fact that I can watch an interview with Bryan, first one in a while, and just be like, it was fine, is a little bit disappointing. That they need to generate hype at some point. This keeps it in the public eye a little bit, but arguably this is what you should have been doing the entire time. This sort of hype, teasing the journey to get us to Avatar Studios. And it just, I think, really highlights. So what this all highlights is that in no way were they prepared for that announcement in 2021. It really feels like they came up with that deal the day before, something like that. That they really were nowhere with Avatar Studios when the announcement was made back in 2021. Because this borderline feels like the introductory video to the studio. And even then, it still feels so secretive to the point where it's like, I don't know what you're doing. Because like, they mention, like, every time, even in this one, he mentions the idea, we've got all these projects, basically in a way kind of pointing at the idea forward and back, all over the place, different eras, different approaches, different tones and stuff like that. There's maybe a slight point in the editing at which, like, they mentioned this, and they bring up is it this bit here? I think, yeah. You go from normal to chibi as he talks about the sort of like tone kind of thing. Now that reference, I believe, is just that's like the video game stuff, Into the Inferno. The difference between the console version and then the 3DS version, which used kind of like Chibi-Yang here, to be kind of tonally a little bit different. But I think that's kind of meant to reference the idea that the whole rumor about the preschool show is absolutely on the table, just based on that. But again, they talked about the idea of it being aimed at different audiences before as well. So highlighting once again, nothing really new here, but it's still a nice video. That's just kind of the point to be made here. I'm trying not to be like too disappointed by it, but I think it's very difficult to not in general be disappointed by where like official communication kind of has been on Avatar Studios. Even if it is very, very early, it feels like we're nowhere near where we need to be as a franchise. And like again, no website. The social media channels don't really feel up to standard, with this being probably one of the more standout kind of videos from the channel that's ever come out here. We need more like this, more stuff like this. And if this is what they can eventually kind of like almost get to, that when we are much closer to release, we are getting maybe updates like this in kind of video form, where it's Mike or Bryan, some other member of the team, just kind of like talking about stuff. That's cool, because obviously we had Coronation during Korra, which kind of gave us a kind of behind the scenes kind of insider kind of look, but through more kind of like blog post, kind of direct kind of like news posts. So it'd be cool if they went full, like, you know, use the channel. And again, 2 million subscribers, why wouldn't you use that? But anyway, they're my thoughts on the news here. So what are your thoughts? Again, to kind of recap here, just thoughts on this video, the Bryan interview, but then also this stuff, the idea of like apparently something's coming soon with the first movie. You know, a little bit on the soundtrack there. We have a writer for the movie apparently, and then just further details on the writer itself. So what are your thoughts on all of this? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.